Thousands of websites went offline this morning. That's after an apparent widespread outage at cloud computing service company Fastly. Vice President Kamala Harris is off on her first trip abroad. While in Guatemala, Harris had a message to migrants thinking of coming to the U.S., telling them, do not come. And the United States has recovered most of the ransom money paid to hackers after the cyber attack on Colonial Pipeline. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Dozens of high-traffic websites unreachable this morning. That's after an apparent widespread outage at cloud computing service company Fastly left thousands of websites offline. People trying to reach the New York Times, CNN, Twitch, and the UK government's homepage met instead with error messages. Other sites experiencing issues included Reddit, Amazon, PayPal, and Spotify. Some websites restored service by switching systems to other networks. Fastly acknowledged an issue just before 6 a.m. Tuesday morning Eastern Time. The latest update says the root issue has been resolved, but some problems will persist on customers' websites. Fastly is one of the world's most widely used content delivery network providers. It offers groupings of servers that let users connect faster to websites. Now, let's go from the internet to the border. Vice President Kamala Harris is off on her first trip abroad. While in Guatemala, NBC's Lester Holt asked if she had plans to visit the southern border. Harris responding, at some point, we are going to the border, adding, we've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. Holt then noted that she hadn't been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
Harris deflected the question, saying, and I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making. Adding, I'm not discounting the importance of the border. Harris made stops in Guatemala and Mexico during her first international trip as vice president. President Biden chose her to be border czar in March. In her remarks with Guatemalan President, Harris said she is optimistic that Guatemalans will find hope at home. But she said to migrants, if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Adding, I want to be clear to folks in this region thinking about making the dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. Harris went on to say the U.S. will continue to enforce its laws and secure the border. She added there are legal ways migration can and should occur. As the crisis on the border mounts, this trip becomes even more significant. A recent report by the Epoch Times said that illegal entries from Venezuelans is up from 135 people last year to around 11,000 this year. That's nearly an 8,000% increase. Border Patrol Chief Austin Scarrow for the Del Rio sector recently said on Twitter, in just the last 7 days, our agents have encountered over 5,800 migrants from nearly 30 different countries. Adding, during this same time, 63 smuggling attempts were caught on our highways. Del Rio is a city of just over 35,000 people, while the nearby Eagle Pass has about 30,000 people. The region is mostly ranch land. According to Customs and Border Protection, the number of Venezuelans coming is quite high. CBP noting in the sector alone, with 4 months to go in the fiscal year, nearly 11,000 Venezuelans were caught. And so far this year, CBP has caught more than 119,000 illegal aliens from 70 countries. The fiscal year started last October. Now let's turn to the courts. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled that illegal immigrants who have protected status are not entitled to a green card. This as the nation is overwhelmed by a surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. Jose Santos Sanchez and his wife, Sonia Gomez, are an El Salvadorian couple living in New Jersey, and they are trying to apply for permanent residency in the U.S. But Sanchez entered the country unlawfully in 1997 and worked in the U.S. without legal authorization. In 2001, the U.S. gave El Salvador the temporary protected status designation after earthquakes hit the country, effectively protecting Sanchez from deportation. So the central question here is, does a temporary protected status enable an illegal immigrant to get a green card? Justice Alina Kagan, one of the court's more liberal justices, wrote the unanimous opinion on Monday, saying no. The U.S. allows foreigners from countries in crisis to remain here for humanitarian reasons, even if they are illegal immigrants. This could be if the country is going through war, an environmental disaster, epidemic, or other conditions. Currently, 12 countries have temporary protected status. They are Burma, also known as Myanmar, El Salvador, Haiti, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. According to a 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court, that doesn't mean illegal immigrants from these regions are eligible to apply for a green card. That's because they still need to meet the requirement of a lawful entry, which in this case Sanchez did not fulfill. Kagan wrote that admission and status are separate ideas. In other words, a temporary protected status does not mean admitting him to the country. The decision comes shortly after President Biden reversed the Remain in Mexico policy that would have asylum seekers at the southern border wait in Mexico until their claims are processed. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas spoke with the Mexican Secretary of Foreign Relations on Friday. Mayorkas is opposite the couple in the court case. The two countries will reportedly cooperate to manage the surge in migration to the U.S. and also to address the weapons flow from the U.S. to Mexico. The Immigration Reform Law Institute is happy about the new court ruling. Executive Director and General Counsel of the Institute, Dane L. Wilcox, said in a statement, "Thankfully, today the court declined to water down the law, but instead maintained the standard that illegal entry into our country will not be tolerated, much less rewarded." Adding, "We are seeing right now what happens when deliberate non-enforcement sends the opposite message, an engineered surge, crisis, and chaos at the border. We are pleased that the court refused to add to that crisis today." The statement is titled "Victory: Supreme Court Blocks Illegal Alien Legalization." Now, staying with the Supreme Court, there's another case the court is refusing to hear. On Monday, the country's highest court declined to hear a challenge to the requirement that only males can register for the military draft. A group called the National Coalition for Men, a men's rights group, filed a challenge. They argue the male-only draft amounts to unconstitutional discrimination on the basis of sex. They highlighted the 2013 Department of Defense order that allowed women to serve in military combat roles. Justice Sonia Sotomayor explains why the challenge won't be heard, writing, "It remains to be seen, of course, whether Congress will end gender-based registration under the Military Selective Service Act. But at least for now, the court's long-standing deference to Congress on matters of national defense and military affairs cautions against granting review while Congress actively weighs the issue." Justices Stephen Breyer and Brett Kavanaugh joined her. Sotomayor goes on to note the Military Selective Service Act of 1948 requires men and only men to register for the draft upon turning 18, and said the Supreme Court in 1981 upheld the Act's gender-based registration requirement against an equal protection challenge, citing the fact that women were excluded from combat roles and hence would not be needed in the event of a draft. But not everyone's happy about the decision. American Civil Liberties Union issued a statement saying requiring only men to register for the draft reflects the outdated and sexist notion that women are less fit to serve in the military and that men are less able to stay home as caregivers in the event of an armed conflict. Adding such stereotypes demean both men and women. The U.S. switched to an all-volunteer military force in 1973. But the draft is still available for activation should the federal government require it. The Selective Service Agency requires that all men register for the draft within 30 days of their 18th birthday. The Biden administration called on the Supreme Court to not take up the case. That's because Congress could, in the meantime, change the law. And now, before we end, an update on the Colonial Pipeline hacking. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco saying, "Today we turn the tables on DarkSide." This after she says the U.S. recovered the majority of the $4.4 million in cryptocurrency that the pipeline paid to the hacking group DarkSide. The Department of Justice just announced on Monday that it recovered some of the ransom money. Officials seized 63.7 bitcoins, valued at around $2.3 million. That's thanks to a search warrant authorized by a U.S. magistrate judge. This search was a part of the department's new ransomware and digital extortion task force. It marks the first operation of this kind. Following the cyber attack from the Russia-based hacker group DarkSide, America's largest fuel pipeline was forced to stop its operations in May, causing gas shortages and a price hike in the East Coast. After the incident, DarkSide claimed it was disbanding last month. And on Sunday, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo said these attacks are here to stay and, if anything, will intensify. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco urged organizations to pay attention to the threat of ransomware attacks and to invest in cybersecurity defense and other preventative measures now. The CEO of Colonial Pipeline began testifying before Congress Tuesday morning. The Justice Department recently gave ransomware attacks the same priority level as terrorism. This comes after several recent cyber attacks targeted key infrastructure and industries in the U.S. The Justice Department says they have created a task force in Washington that will coordinate all ransomware investigations. Currently, those investigations are handled by U.S. attorneys' offices in different states. Reuters says it will help authorities draw necessary connections between separate attacks. The department says this model has been used in terrorism cases, but never before with ransomware. The Justice Department also asked U.S. attorneys to also share information about other kinds of cybersecurity cases. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.